Hello and welcome to the Crypto Insider interview. I'm Vlad, and today I will be interviewing Alan Piscitello, who works for Blockstream, and I'm going to allow him to introduce himself and distinguish between whether or not he speaks on his behalf or he mentions whatever the statement or the views of the companies are. And please, you may speak right now.
All right. Yes. My name is Alan Piscitello. I'm the director of product management at Blockstream. So what my job is to help define products that we build at Blockstream. My focus has mostly been on Liquid, which we just released the last couple of weeks. We have quite a few different exchanges, financial institutions, and brokers and traders on this platform to have more fast and private Bitcoin transactions along with other assets. So I've been at Blockstream just over a year. I've been in the Bitcoin space for nearly 7 years as well. So I've been following Blockstream since the very beginning and only recently joined. So thanks for having me on, Vlad.
Oh, this is a privilege. It's the first time when I speak with somebody from Blockstream, and there is some sort of mystification of Blockstream going on online. If you read many threads on Reddit, they're going to mention, oh, these people are not very transparent. They don't want to speak. They're concealing themselves from the public eye. And I even watched, I think, a video on the Monero threads, and it was at some conference where Adam Back was also attending, and Fluffy Pony just went there to the reporter and gave an interview while Adam Back had to be persuaded, and he was a little more reluctant to speak to the reporters. And is it just because he's shy, or do you think he has something to conceal from the reporters who might ask malevolent questions?
I think it depends on the situation. I know Adam's definitely a one of the more shy people out there. I remember when my first exposure to Adam actually was in 2013 when it was a big deal that they had him on a podcast, and he was very, I think, stayed on the outside, didn't really say very much about things, and that's changed a lot over the years. He's been speaking at a lot of conferences and really has been fairly influential in the space. But I think this is his comfort zone is in a lot of times building cryptographic systems and coming up with great ideas rather than being the PR frontman, I think. So I think that might be part of what was going on. I think there's also a little bit of concern because there are a lot of not so fair or journalists that do have an agenda. So if some random stranger comes up, it might not be clear if it's someone looking to get a gotcha moment or if someone that's actually looking to have an honest interview. So I think that might be part of it as well. But I wasn't there. I can't speak exactly for what it is. Just can only speculate about what it is from what it is with Adam. Adam's always been someone who's been very open, I think, within the company and been very active in the community. I've actually been, Adam was in the core Slack for many years, talking to people and very open and transparent. Everything he's told me back then, before I was at Blockstream, seems to be true after even being there for a year. So I think he just needs to be in his comfort zone.
Okay, but why do you think there's so much criticism about him? Because after all, he's an OG cypherpunk. He's the one who invented the proof of work consensus system. And a lot of people seem to question whether or not he's qualified. And when I say a lot of people, they might be from our BTC and they might be associated with Roger Ver or Jihan. But why do they hate him personally? Why
Well,
do
you
you
need
think this
yeah,
happens?
I think you need a target. The biggest way to align a group of people who maybe would not be aligned politically is to find a common enemy. And so Blockstream became this target mainly because there were so many influential people in the space that, on their own joined together, formed this company. And that made an easy target for a lot of people. And a lot of these people were, engineering and technical folks who, they just want to write code and they just want to write great code. And that's their focus. They're not interested in PR. They're not interested in playing games. They're not interested in politics. And it became an easy target. And, I think Adam wasn't the target for a while. Adam, had been involved in a couple of things in the past, like the Hong Kong agreement. But, really, I think Greg Maxwell took the brunt of it for a long time. And I think that was, very unfair. He just wanted to write code, and I think that's, he's off doing things in Bitcoin now. Now that target's gone, so they need a new target. And Adam's, the clear target as someone who's the biggest figurehead in the company. He's the one that they can point their sights at and fire away. Adam, I think, is pretty good about not taking it personally and not letting it bother him. I think a lot of people are just out there to, they need an enemy to fight. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to stay aligned, and they wouldn't be able to, have a way to keep from infighting.
Okay, now let's move away from all the gossip and all the rumors, and let's talk something more concrete, like the launch of Liquid.
Absolutely. Yes. Do you have something specific there, Vlad, or just wait?
Yes.
Fire away at it.
Personally, I wrote an article about it, and I've actually asked Samson to review it and tell me if I got anything wrong, because in the FAQ section, there weren't many technical mentions. They tried to put it in layman terms and maybe explain so that anyone can understand. But there are some concerns which I personally had with the idea of having geographical diversity, in the sense that you try to have as many exchanges from as many countries and continents as possible so that you avoid a concentration of power in one area. And this is healthy for the democratic consensus decision making between the participants of the sidechain. But let's imagine that you have a concentration of exchanges, because China and the United States have many more exchanges than most countries. But in the future, if you have an American exchange which wants to join, do you think that there will be like a queue waiting in line for another Chinese exchange to be interested in joining so that they can balance the consensus?
Yeah, so we do have a requirement of the network to make sure that there's, the risk is distributed both politically and geographically. We don't want a natural disaster to take out enough of the network to take it down. This would likely happen in a single place, and we don't want any kind of political event to take down the network. So, as you know, there's certain countries that have been harder on exchanges than others, and so we want to make sure that that's balanced. And we can balance this by, we actually have two different levels of membership in the network. We have the functionary members. Those are the ones that are actually running the servers that are running the network. And we have what's called participants. So if we ever get to a point where there's too many in one region, it actually worked out. It wasn't, we actually had just naturally that spread. It wasn't even intentional to go like recruit certain regions or anything like that. But if we ever got to that point, we would just be able to add people as participants in that region without having to, have a functionary there. But I think in the future, it worked out pretty naturally in this time. We didn't want to have any more than 4 in any particular country or region, and we actually never had more than 3. So we actually have, a buffer in that, and that worked out pretty well. In the future, as the federation expands, all these members who are participants would like to, have them be functionaries in the future. And as they do that, the federation will grow, and that number that can go in a single region also goes up. So because the number is actually, we don't want more than 1/3 of the network in a single region. That means that we can have it would be pretty unlikely to have that much concentration in any particular region. You mentioned China and the U.S. It's actually interesting. China, I think we only have one exchange in there as well, and in the U.S., it's actually not exchanges that we have, but we have some financial institutions and other parties that are actually the functionaries in the U.S. So it's pretty natural mix that we had just from talking to people.
I remember when it was launched and at the announcement that some people were outraged by the idea, and they did not understand that it's a second layer. So if it fails, it's not going to affect the main chain in any way. And also, I guess there was enthusiasm prior to the release. I mean, people have known about Liquid for 3 years or something?
I think that's about right. I think we announced it 3 years ago.
And then at the launch, there was just this wave of criticism going around on Twitter and Bitcoin Talk. And do you think this was just part of the opposition trying to attack your idea?
I don't think it was just the opposition trying to attack the idea. I think there were some people that were, you know, just wanted to understand the model and maybe didn't think about it before this point. So, we released the liquid law. We announced this. We did the sidechains white paper when the company was founded. We've announced liquid pretty early, and we also did the strong federations white paper fairly early as well. So this whole idea of the federated sidechain has been around a while. But it's been, in very academic papers, and probably didn't make its way very deep on Reddit or Twitter, and a lot of people didn't, just saw side chains and just realized, just thought about the original merge mining idea. It's still something we are interested in and we want to pursue. The state of mining has been very centralized, and that greatly harms the security of that model. So we wanted to also look at other models that would be viable in the near term. And the federated model actually is required for the liquid use case. Even if we had merge mining, it wouldn't actually be able to solve liquid as well, the liquid use case as well. And the reason for this is we want to have, one of the problems with people have with moving money on between exchanges is you want to have a fast settlement time, and you want to have it reliably, a reliable settlement time. So in that case, the only way, if you have mining, you're always going to have variance that there might not be a block for a long time. And that's just the nature of mining. And so the federated model was the only way to really guarantee that was in there. And the other part is, I think that people were using the yardstick of comparing liquid to Bitcoin. So you mentioned, liquid is a second layer. It's independent. It's people doing things on their own. It doesn't affect the main chain in any way. And so that's a big part is, we're very passionate about making sure liquid stays decentralized and trustless at the base layer, because you can still build other decentralized layers on top, like Lightning, and you can build more centralized systems on top as well, like Liquid. And that's, different use cases, different trade-offs, different benefits. People can choose to use one or the other without affecting the underlying currency. So yeah, the yardstick was really comparing Bitcoin or Liquid to Bitcoin, when reality is the use case that Liquid is replacing or enhancing is the case where it's completely centralized today. So the use case you have is if you're trading on an exchange, in order to actually be able to trade reliably, you need to just leave a lot of funds on these exchanges. And we know, going back all the way to the days of Mt. Gox, and every year it seems like this happens. If you leave money on an exchange, bad things can happen. And when you're trusting a single party, there can be insiders that take your funds. There can be bugs that make your funds get lost. There can be hackers that attack it. And so the idea is you're moving from a single custodian when you're holding funds with Liquid to a group of the functionaries, where it would be much harder to attack all of these different entities all around the world, all with their own data centers, all with these servers that we don't even know where they're at. So it's a very challenging problem for someone who's trying to attack the network. So this is why the yardstick really for Liquid is, well, if your alternative is just leaving money on a single exchange, Liquid is definitely going to be a improvement for you, because you're now trusting a federation of exchanges. If your yardstick before was, I'm holding my Bitcoin on my own, I don't trust anyone, I don't want anyone to mess with them, I don't want to ever be have to worry about them. Yeah, you shouldn't be putting those coins in Liquid. So it's a different model, has different features, has different benefits. And then as soon as you're done using Liquid, you can always move your coins right back to the main Bitcoin network and take advantage of all the properties you have of Bitcoin.
You've mentioned the Lightning Network, and I know that Blockstream is also involved in developing the Lightning Network. But how different, or how would you explain the difference between Lightning and Liquid?
Yeah, so this comes up a lot. There's a lot of confusion, I think, with the difference between Liquid and Lightning. So yeah, there's definitely some overlap. Both do things like be able to send payments much faster than you would otherwise do. With Lightning, you don't even have to wait for 2-minute settlement. You're getting payment very quickly. Lightning is using a more reactive security model. So if someone tries to steal your funds, you have a time where you can go and reclaim all the funds in the channel. So that's a different security model. It's not necessarily one's better than the other. But the big thing is, Lightning's really geared towards micropayments, and that's just the nature of the network. The Lightning itself, you need to have channels with funds and available funds along routes in the network. And really what that means in reality is you're going to have a lot of channels open that you maybe aren't able to utilize for every single payment. And for most microtransactions, for most small payments, any kind of retail use case, that's usually fine. If you have, $100 tied up on, 5 different channels, and you wanted to pay $5 for a coffee, no problem. You'll be able to find a channel that does that. Now, if you're a large trader and you're looking to move 1,000 Bitcoin, and you're going to want to move it between one exchange and another, you're going to need to have enough capacity of all these different channels to move all those funds, to any of the different exchanges you want. So the channel capacity and routing issue becomes a little bit more amplified in this case. So that's a use case where Lightning is not necessarily as well suited. And then the other part too is Liquid has another feature that Lightning doesn't have at all, and that's issued assets. So Liquid has the ability to issue any arbitrary assets on the platform. They can represent anything from fiat tokens to crypto lions or any other asset type that you'd want, and that's just really just not at the Bitcoin base layer. But if we look for Liquid to scale in the future to even much larger numbers than we have today, we're actually looking to build Lightning on top of Liquid. So that's actually an investment that's for Bitcoin and also will be useful for Liquid. So in the ability is you can even pay any asset using Lightning as well. Now it's something that's going to take some time. We're going to get it perfect on Bitcoin before we really start moving it to Liquid. But it's something that is going to be very beneficial for using Liquid in the future for more use cases.
This doesn't have to be an official statement. It can be your opinion, but which coins do you think will join Liquid in the near future? Because so far it's only available for Bitcoin, right?
I'm sorry, the video froze up there for a second, so I missed the question.
Well, which coins do you think will be a part of Liquid after Bitcoin?
Yeah, so we actually looked at this as could we have an official consensus-based peg-in for other coins? And people are wanting to have every coin under the sun on Liquid. And really, there's a couple of requirements we have for getting a coin that we'd consider having as a consensus-based peg. And the requirements would have to be that there's a history of you could leave it hands off. The chain has to be secure. There's, it's unlikely that any kind of proof of work rollbacks would occur. It's any kind of hard fork where there's manual intervention, required. That's going to make it very unlikely to be able to be supported on Liquid. So, the list of coins on that started dwindling and dwindling down. We've seen attacks on a lot of coins, or we know that they're possible when there's not very much proof of work behind them. And that's something where it could jeopardize the entire system if there was a problem with one of the coins and it required manual intervention. So we really didn't feel great about a lot of the other coins out there, even some of the bigger ones. They have a history of splits or hard forks or arbitrary fast decisions where certain developers go to the chat rooms and say, please stop trading. We can't do that with Liquid. This is something that's sitting off in a secure data center, and everyone's not going to be able to react that fast. So that knocked down the list pretty small. And we thought maybe we could do one or two, but at that point it was only covering a small percentage of the use case people would have. So really, we're going to focus on another way to do it, which is having an unofficial peg where the consensus of the system is not affected by it, but other parties could, represent either do it individually or as a federation, where they hold, an underlying asset like Litecoin or Ethereum, and they, hold this asset either single signature or multi-signature, and they issue tokens on Liquid representing those assets. And if someone wanted to redeem those tokens for those underlying assets, they would go to the issuer and do it, which is very similar to Liquid today. The issuers of Liquid Bitcoin is just the federation. This is just a different federation that, if the the issuer itself in this case failed to live up to their promises, it wouldn't take down the Liquid network. So it's a little bit of buyer beware of try to find a federation that's doing this. But again, people are already trusting custodians with their coins when they're trading anyway. So I don't think it's that much of a stretch to do that, even if if there's a single issuer. But we'd like to build a federation of, if there's interest from the members to build up a smaller federation to do an unofficial peg for other assets. So they will be coming. You asked when will they be coming. We actually we created some assets on Liquid at launch just for fun. They're not actually representing anything real, but those are there. The assets I would expect probably to be there first or early would probably be related to the fiat tokens. So that's something that we're pursuing very strongly. Liquid allows for single transaction atomic swaps, which would be really nice for trustless exchange model. So you can have a single transaction that swaps, one of the USD coins with Bitcoin, and that happens in the single transaction trustlessly. So this is something where, a lot of our members are interested in, and it's a matter of bringing some of the existing ones on board, or maybe there'll be some new players in the space that see the opportunity in Liquid.
So that was a very long explanation in which you said that there will probably never be an Ethereum federation on Liquid because it has a history of hard forks and it's unpredictable in its nature of governance. But it's likely that Litecoin will have one just because it wasn't ever meddled with.
I don't know if I would say never meddled with, but we potentially could do it, but again, it's a lot of work just to support one coin to do that. Where our users, our customers, they want dozens of coins to do this. So I think even with something like Litecoin, we would recommend having it the same infrastructure of a federation or a trusted custodian holds a portion of Litecoin and issues liquid Litecoin and deals with the peg themselves. And the exchanges that already are dealing with Litecoin today, they're already holding Litecoin for traders. So I think it would be a natural fit. We've seen some interest from our members in this use case. So it's just a matter of getting it off the ground and facilitating it.
Okay. What about the development of Bitcoin Core, the client? To which extent is Blockstream involved, and does it support the new talented coders who want to get in and program?
Yeah, so from the Bitcoin Core side, we have Peter Woolley, who is full-time Bitcoin, builds things that he wants on it, just basically can pursue in research areas where he wants. And so that's what Peter does. Peter's doing a lot of interesting research, probably a lot of stuff even above my head. But there is some overlap between that and Liquid. So one of the things that we would really like to see in Liquid is Schnorr signatures. Schnorr signatures allow you to have a more efficient way of signing, especially multi-signature transactions. So Liquid, as you know, has a federation that has a large number of members and needs a large number of signatures. Schnorr would be very useful for Liquid, and also would help us get to even larger federations than are possible today. So there's some overlap. He's doing a lot of other interesting projects on it as well, and then just because Liquid is based on Elements. Elements is our open source blockchain platform, and Elements is actually a fork of Bitcoin. So there's a lot of commonality there. So we have things that are useful for us in Bitcoin that are also useful for us in Liquid and Elements. And so if we are developing them, we'll also always try to push everything we can down to the base layer of Bitcoin. So that other people do this. So you'll see we have a lot of developers that do have commits to Bitcoin Core. So Greg Sanders, he's our tech lead of Liquid. He's contributed to Bitcoin Core in the past. We've had Jonas Nick, who's also contributed a lot. He's on our research team. Andrew Polstra on our research team doing a lot of interesting cryptographic work. So a lot of these people, they will contribute to Bitcoin. Basically either it's just things they're already working on for the products we're working on, and it's useful for Bitcoin too, and we want to share that. Or people just like to hack on Bitcoin in their free time. So we have a lot of people very interested in the space. But really, we have one full-time developer on it with a lot of people kind of incidentally touching it. It's a pretty small number right now compared to a lot of the other companies out there. I think Chaincode Labs has 3, I think, maybe 4 at this point. Developers working on this. Actually, I think they have 4 now. And we have, the MIT Media Lab has a few people working on it, and lots of other companies have really stepped up to the plate and started contributing to Bitcoin Core. So we're really excited to, Blockstream's gotten this reputation of being the source of Bitcoin developers, but really we're actually kind of small right now compared to a lot of the other players that have stepped up to the plate.
I think that's a big misconception, as people usually point out to Bitcoin Core as having a monopoly, and they say that there aren't any alternative clients which are worthy of being used. And Bitcoin Cash usually takes pride in having two teams which develop two different projects. But also, I think I read that there is a risk of having an accidental hard fork because of the differences between the two softwares. So how would you describe the situation? Is it better to have one client on which many teams work, or would it be a good idea to diversify the offer and allow teams to work on their individual clients?
Yeah, I think we can go back to Satoshi back in, I think, 2010 even identified this. He said, and I'm going to misquote him, I think, here, but I think he even said that having a second client would be a nuisance to the network. Getting things right with consensus is extremely hard. We've seen history of, even with the same client, just in different architectures or in different scenarios, disagree about consensus. And this is, even on the same exact piece of software, same code, same machine, that it may, if you have a small bug, you could have a situation where they disagree about what the next, if a block is valid or not. So you start adding in, new clients and new team, not necessarily new teams, but new clients and new software. You always have the possibility that there is some small subtle bug in one of the clients or the other, and they may disagree. And I think Peter Todd wrote a really, really good article about this. I think some of the teams have said, well, it's really good that if there's a problem, someone might stop and everyone else might continue on. And it's like, no, you don't. You want to shut everything down when there's a consensus mismatch. You want to, stop the transactions. You want to make sure no one's going to be losing money, because someone losing money is much worse than nothing happening. The absolute worst case in something happening is we figure out what's wrong, we fix it, we move on. Whereas if it starts splitting and going for, you could go on for hours or days unnoticed, now you have a big mess to clean up. So he talked a lot about, redundant systems and, fire alarms and being able to, detect problems and shut down and turn on the sprinklers. And, if you think there's a fire, you're going to turn on your sprinklers, even if it's going to, fry your servers, because you don't want the building to burn down. So I think that's kind of the philosophy there. I think with alternate teams, I think that's really a symptom. And this is my personal opinion, not anything official Blockstream. A lot of that is a symptom of people just can't play nicely with others. A lot of these teams for other, like I would say with BCH, they basically came from people who didn't really get along well with others on the Bitcoin Core team. And so when you have people, I'm not going to name specific names, but there's people who even go back to older projects, even older than Bitcoin, that have had this history. And it's, not really terribly surprising they don't get along, and then they end up not getting along even on their new projects and form, 3 or 4 teams. I think the real strength of Bitcoin Core is that there are, hundreds of contributors. There are people that are welcomed in. They're brand new. They are welcomed. They start contributing. I think, for example, Kali Alm is he's not new anymore, but he came in and was a very strong contributor right away, and started adding value to Bitcoin Core and became a top contributor very quickly. And so that's something where, if you have the skills and you can cooperate with others and you can listen to feedback and you can take constructive criticism and you have the patience for it, I think you can do a lot. And so that's something that I think Bitcoin Core has done really well. The people who have contributed have worked well together, and I think the strength is that everyone is working all together and you're not doing everything 3 times. So I think that's made for a lot more innovation and a lot better eyes on review of checking things. If you have more people reviewing things, the more likely you are to find problems. And I think that's probably the right way to go. There are other clients, and some of them are academic projects, some of them are designed to balance this out. But I think it's a risk to the network that there will be a split. And reality is, if there's a split, even if there's something that we say is a bug in Bitcoin Core, really the code speaks for itself. This code is the spec. So if there's a problem there, chances are the other clients are going to have to pick that up. So an example is in multi-signature transactions in Bitcoin, there's an extra push operation, which that means is you have to just put an extra piece of garbage on your script to make it work. And that's kind of a bug. I think everyone would agree that that's a silly bug. It probably shouldn't be there, but that's just how it is. And so everyone has to implement that, and everyone has to implement the same bug for it to be compatible. And it's just how it's going to go. And when you have corner cases or advanced features, it's always possible to miss something and cause a chain split. And and if you're not watching both chains, you're potentially someone who could go off and not realize that there's another chain going on that you have no idea about.
I think I've also read a few hours ago a tweet by Jameson Lopp, who praised the 014 implementation of Bitcoin Core and even said that his node was syncing up 5% faster than previously, and predicted that with Schnorr signatures and all the improvements that the team is bringing up to the client, it's going to get so much more faster, and the blockchain is going, as in the blocks are not going to be as bloated anymore because the data gets compressed to greater results. Like, it's much more efficient.
Yeah, no, there's just non-stopping innovation, and I followed this space for a long time. And the funny thing is, in the last year, even working full time at Blockstream, rather than just having Bitcoin being a hobby, it's been harder to keep up with innovation and just follow it myself of what's going on than ever before. And even though I can spend my entire day in the space, so it's just really amazing what the team has been working on. They're doing all kinds of different things to enhance efficiency, privacy, fungibility, and they're very focused on making this work. And so I've been really impressed with the development quality of the team.
What is your prediction for Bitcoin? Do you think it will become a mainstream global mean of payment, or do you think it will be more like a store of value even when you have Lightning and Liquid?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I don't think any of us really know. I've been in the space a long time. I would have never guessed we are where we are here today, and just the mainstream level of adoption. One of the members of Liquid is the SIX Digital Exchange, which is this stock exchange in Switzerland. We have earlier this year we released a cryptocurrency data feed product with the ICE, who is the owner of the New York Stock Exchange. So we were literally in the boardroom and on the floor of the stock exchange talking about cryptocurrencies. I never would have thought we would have been here today. So I know I'm going to look silly with any kind of prediction of where Bitcoin is going. I think the most important, and this is my personal opinion, aspect of Bitcoin is I think there's a lot of people concerned about replacing Visa or MasterCard or banks, but I think that really my personal opinion is the biggest competitor to Bitcoin is the bank, the reserve banks of the world that are issuing their own currencies. And I think this is really something Satoshi was getting at is, if you want to have something that's money, you need to have it where it's only ruled by mathematics and not ruled by the whims of politicians or by cartels that are making these decisions. And that's something Bitcoin really does well. So if it does anything at all that's useful, I think that's the most important thing it could do. But I think I'm very optimistic that as it becomes this store of value, as people start running to it, and I live in the United States. It's a little bit more stable here than a lot of other countries, but currency instability exists frequently in other parts of the world. We're seeing it in Venezuela, we've seen it in Zimbabwe, we've seen it in Argentina a few times, we've seen it in Mexico. These things happen all the time, and I think and there's a lot of reasons why they do happen. But something like Bitcoin is not susceptible to that. So I think that's as people start running to it and moving towards it, and I'm very optimistic about the tech that we have for other layers of solutions and how we can continually innovate and build a better system on top of it. So, some of it may resemble things like Lightning Network. Some of it may start resembling things that are very similar to financial institutions today. But that's okay. What you'll have is you'll have greater choice. You'll have greater accessibility of anyone who wants to join the network and compete against any of these other companies will have the power to do so without needing to ask for permission from anyone. And I think that's a big difference between the system we have today and Bitcoin. So I'm very optimistic. 10 years out, 20 years out, I have no idea where we're going to be. I'm just looking to see. I think Bitcoin's either going to get incredibly large. It's going to dominate, a lot of the money of the world. People will be building systems on top of it, or it'll be nothing. I think that's really the two extremes. And I think I'm willing to take the bet that my personal investments in Bitcoin, and that there's a decent enough chance that it could be quite large. We're seeing a lot of adoption from places that I never would have expected it from. We're seeing, I think we saw the big news about Fidelity recently getting involved in this space. We've seen a lot of more traditional, not necessarily traditional, but I'd say more startup type financial companies like Square and Robinhood getting involved in cryptocurrencies. There's cryptocurrency data feed on that the New York Stock Exchange, or the ICE is launching. So yeah, these conversations are coming up. Institutional investors are they're seeing the asset class. I think that scares a lot of people because the scare is the old guards that come in and take control. But I'm confident enough in the underlying technology that they can't do anything to stop it. They can try, but there's too much decentralization. There's too much power. But we have to keep asserting that ourselves. The users of Bitcoin need to be strong, and I think we got a little bit of a test to the immune system last year with a couple of different attacks on Bitcoin that went very well, and I think that proves that outside parties will have a difficult time influencing or changing Bitcoin, but that's only as strong as its users and are able to resist that.
Do you think, sorry, do you think that part of the spirit was lost in the sense that right now you can look at the average user on Twitter who complains about another ETF being rejected? And when Bitcoin first came out, it was completely against financial institutions. It was like this anarchist way of saying, I'm not going to use your money. I want to construct my own system in which I transact value. And do you think that was lost in the community?
Yeah, I think the community might have missed the mark a little bit on that. I think, if you look at the adoption waves of Bitcoin, I think you had, the early adoption waves is, a lot of people who are on the, cypherpunks mailing lists, the cryptography mailing lists that were out there. They saw it. But I think the person who got it the most early on was Hal Finney. And Hal Finney even, identified we have this base layer that's completely secure, that's completely decentralized, that's out of anyone's control. And maybe someday there are things like Bitcoin banks that are built on top of it. But now you have your choice of who they are. And they can't actually change the money supply or influence that. Or if you don't like your bank, it's very easy to go off the bank and have a system where you have your own type of payment. So I don't think they're incompatible with each other. And I think a lot of people that came in later, you had a lot of the, as you mentioned, a lot of the anarchist crowd, anarchist libertarian crowd that came in, and a mix. There's an overlap of that and just people who are anti-authority or anti-corporation that came in as well. I don't think they're incompatible. I think the most important thing is that none of those companies, none of those banks, none of those businesses have any influence over the protocol or your money. And in that case, if you don't like what they're doing, don't use them. Go, stay on what you do, or use, the level of competition will be much higher where you don't have to go ask permission of a banking cartel to join a payment network. You make your own bank in a regulator friendly country, and people are free to use that service if they want, or no service. Now, I think what Hal missed, and I can't blame him on this one, is just the level of technology that we've been able to build on top that have even made that level unnecessary. So things like Lightning Network, that's something that really, I think Satoshi had, it might have been Satoshi or even Mike Hearn, but just had the idea of payment channels pretty early. That was kind of a thought, but the idea of Lightning Network as this is just kind of, even further of, you don't even necessarily need those things if you don't want them. So I think that, people might have not realized that, freedom doesn't necessarily mean banning these things from existing or keeping them from existing. It means that they can exist, or you can use things that don't require, those levels of regulation or compliance, and that they exist on their own. So I think that's the part that was missed by a lot of the community there. Again, if an ETF happens, that's if people want to participate in that, they're free to do so. I know a lot of people who don't feel comfortable being their own bank, and if they feel more comfortable with a custodian, then that's their choice. If someone wants to be their own bank and wants to hold all their money and have no one be able to stop them from using it, they have that power still. So these things existing don't take that away. It's all just additive. So I think that's the concern. Um, the main thing I would warn the community about is being aware of is just making sure, as these entities come in, that they don't have control and they don't have the ability to change things. So to do that, we need to make sure everyone can run a node who wants to. We want to make sure that everyone's able to validate the transactions as if they want to. So they're not reliant on any third party if they don't have to. But that doesn't mean they can't choose to. And I think that's what freedom's about.
Do you think we should maybe establish a custom which says that if you own more than, say, zero point 0.1 BTC, then you should be running your own node for security?
Yes, I don't think owning BTC is necessarily the drawback there. So the real thing you care about with a node is when you're receiving a payment. Because once I have that Bitcoin and I've received it as a payment, whatever's going on with the blockchain actually doesn't really matter. So, right now, let's just say, for example, someone bought, 10 BTC and they validated that it's all valid. They received the transaction. It's all there. The transaction's finalized. It's gotten 1,000 blocks on top of it. Whether they run a node or not doesn't matter because they're not validating any payments. They're not doing anything. But when they're receiving that payment in the future, maybe they buy more. They should definitely be running a node to validate that. So I think it's the distinction of whether you have it or not. I'd say it's more of whether you are receiving payments, and another factor is who you're receiving payments from. So if my best friend sent me some Bitcoin on his and I see it on my phone, I have a watch wallet on my phone and I have a full node at home. I'm going to trust that he paid me because he's my friend and he's probably not going to rip me off. And maybe when I get home, I'll check it out later. So I think there's a lot of black and white thinking in this space of run a node or it doesn't matter. I think it's very situational. So, are you receiving payments? Are you receiving payments from people you don't trust at all and maybe don't have recourse from? You absolutely want to run a full node on that case. When I'm spending, I'm making a payment, and if someone is happy to think they got paid, then they're on their way. So I think, receiving is the idea. I think Eric Fullskill wrote up some really good articles about this as well.
Now, let's wrap this up by speaking of Magical Crypto Friends, which is a show which sometimes gets labeled as the Blockstream propaganda on Twitter. Do you think it's educational if people watch it? Or do you think it's maybe too negative in the sense that they spend too much time slamming other projects and not being constructive enough?
Well, I think it's a mix, right? So there's a lot of drama in this space, and like it or not, that's what people are drawn to is drama and disagreements, and that's going to be common for a long time. If there's the days when there's no drama, it's kind of scary that are people actually paying attention anymore? So it's going to be a show like that. That's, I would say, it borders between serious topics and fun and games. And I think it's Samson's on there. He's famous for his Twitter tweets. That's how I knew him before Blockstream, and he will say things that are provocative. So I think that's always going to be part of the show. I think it's needed. I think calling out, there's a lot of things in this space that are just either scams or just lies or bad things, and I think calling that out is important. So a lot of people say it's maybe not constructive, but keeping people away from scams or problems or bad situations is actually very healthy. And staying away from attacks, being able to defend against attacks on Bitcoin is something that's needed. And it seems, your immune system attacking a virus inside of your body, that seems very negative and destructive, but really it's needed to survive. So I think that part is necessary. It is a fun show. They I don't think they take themselves very seriously. They've got a cartoon opening that's pretty ridiculous, and that's just who they are. That's just who the gang is, and I think the whole show started out as a kind of a joke from Whale Panda, just saying they should make a show, and they did, and Samson took it to the next level with the cartoon at the beginning, and I think that's just kind of just a way to kick back a little on that. So it's definitely. I don't think they expected it to last as long as it's done. At least that's my impression of that.
I mostly agree. I started watching about a year ago when the Segwit 2X hard fork was about to happen. And I guess that's where they drew their inspiration from, because the intro used to be so much longer, and they include like a scene in which they save Bitcoin from the evil New York agreement, and it gets very dark and stormy, and they just try to approach these monsters which are trying to destroy Bitcoin. In a way, it was funny. But I guess as the situation got more relaxed and the development for the Lightning and Liquid started to become much more concrete and closer to meet the deadlines, I guess it got softer. At first, it was all about calling out Bitcoin Cash and saying, oh, it's Bcash. And it was all about calling out scams, which were, I guess it was the right time for scams to happen, because it was that phenomenal bull run and that bubble which we all saw grow and burst. But right now, I think they should focus much more on the technology, just so the average Twitter person can understand how Liquid works. Because I noticed that in the last show, they name dropped it like a dozen times. Do you still hear me?
Yeah, cut out for just a second.
You
But
just said your internet connection is unstable, and I had no idea if I was just speaking in vain.
I heard a little bit. You're saying you'd like to see more focused on technology and updates on
Yes.
that, and I think I'm not sure that's the right avenue for it. So, if you look at who's on that show, we have a very good mix of people. You have Ricardo, who's a developer. You have Charlie, who's a developer. You have Whale Panda, who's claim to fame is trading, and you have Samson, who's claim to fame is a lot of Twitter and marketing side of things. So I think we'd to do that type of approach, I think you'd want to have some type of guests on there who are very knowledgeable about the technology on there. So just I think with who you have on there, you're going to end up with kind of a little bit more slightly below the surface, but not a deep dive on there. And I think the show's needs to stay at that like high level of broad audience of basically who's on the show. Without guests, and I think they've had guests on there a few times, but those are the people who are really going to get into the weeds. Even I get in the weeds a little bit more on Liquid than Samson, and I think I'm still need to learn a lot compared to a lot of our engineers that are on there. So I think it's a different show. I think it's meant to be fun. I think you were dead on with saying the bull market was a big part of the drama. Drama always seems to correspond to the price of Bitcoin. I think they're very closely related. I'm not going to say which one. I think it's probably the price causes the drama, but we've seen the bull market crashed, and we've seen things kind of stabilize, and even the price is boring at this point. It just sits right around the same value for weeks on end. So people are busy building things, and that harms the drama side of things, and that's not a bad thing for Bitcoin, but it's probably a bad thing for the ratings of the show. If there's not as much interesting things to talk about in terms of drama. So I know they've been talking a little bit more technical, but I think maybe getting some technical guests would be useful. Now just got to see if any of them are willing to go on a cartoon show. I think that's the question.
Okay, I don't think I have anything else to ask you, but if there's any last comment that you'd like to make for Crypto Insider, as in tell us how we can follow you on Twitter and how we can write to you or something, just in case we have questions about Blockstream.
I know I like to stay off the grid for the most part, but it's been a little bit more since that. So best way to reach me, So yeah, if you email liquid@blockstream.com, if anyone interested and has any questions about Liquid, that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. I answer that a lot. But yeah, besides that, I'm pretty low key and off the grid besides that. So yeah,
Okay.
thanks for having me on, Vlad. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.